The early morning fog clung to the evergreens like funeral shrouds, obscuring the peaks of Mount Blackfall and casting the forest trail in an ethereal glow. It was June 17, 1998. The temperature hovered at a comfortable 68 degrees, typical for early summer in the Pacific Northwest. Perfect hiking weather, many would say. For 5 teenagers from the nearby town of Pinecrest, it was the first day of what was supposed to be the adventure of their young lives. They had just graduated high school. College loomed ahead. Adventures called. And Blackfall Ridge Trail, with its sweeping vistas and hidden swimming holes, beckoned with the promise of freedom. None of them would ever return home. It was the kind of disappearance that doesn't make sense, no matter how you look at it, says retired Sheriff Thomas Graydon, his weathered face a map of creases from years of carrying the burden of this unsolved case. 5 kids, all of them experienced in this woods. All of them vanished without a trace. The 5 friends, Jackson Palmer, Eliza Winters, Trevor Foster, Vanessa McKay, and Daniel Porter, had been inseparable throughout high school. Known around town as the Pinecrest Five, they were well-liked, responsible teenagers. Each had bright futures ahead of them. Each had plans, dreams, families who loved them. Their plan was simple: a 3-day hike along Blackfall Ridge, camping at designated sites before returning on June 20th for a graduation party. They had permits. They had proper gear. They had left detailed itineraries with their parents. Everything by the book. Jackson wouldn't go anywhere without being prepared, says Margaret Palmer, Jackson's mother, in a statement given to police in 1998. Her voice, captured on an old cassette recording, breaks slightly. He learned from his father. Maps, compass, extra food, first aid. That boy was an Eagle Scout, for God's sake. The teenagers were last seen at approximately 8:15 a.m. on that foggy June morning, stopping at Dale's General Store at the edge of town to pick up last-minute supplies. Security footage, grainy and low quality by today's standards, shows them laughing, excited. Trevor Foster purchased an extra roll of film for his camera. Eliza Winters bought a postcard she planned to mail to her grandmother from the ranger station halfway through their journey. Dale Thurman, the store's owner, remembers them well. Good kids, he told investigators. Regulars. Came in all the time. Vanessa asked me to save the new issue of Rolling Stone magazine for her. Said she'd pick it up when they got back. That magazine would sit behind the counter for months, gathering dust, before Dale finally put it away in a drawer where it remains to this day. The alarm was raised at 9 p.m. on June 20th, when none of the teenagers arrived at the graduation party being hosted by the Fosters. Calls to their pagers went unanswered. No one had heard from any of them since the morning they departed. By midnight, the first search parties were forming. By dawn, over 200 volunteers from Pinecrest and neighboring communities had gathered, ready to comb the dense, unforgiving wilderness of Blackfall Ridge. We had a system, explains former search and rescue coordinator Lisa Reeves. Grid searches, dogs, experienced outdoorsmen who knew every inch of those trails. If those kids were out there, we were going to find them. But they didn't. For 14 days, search teams scoured every trail, every ravine, every possible path the teenagers might have taken. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging flew overhead. Specialized cadaver dogs were brought in from as far away as California. The FBI established a temporary headquarters in the Pinecrest Community Center. Not a single trace of the Pinecrest Five was found. No backpacks, no equipment, no clothing, not even a footprint. It was as if they had simply stepped off the trail and into thin air. The most disturbing part, says former FBI agent Catherine Drake, who was assigned to the case, was the complete absence of evidence. In my 22 years with the Bureau, I have never seen anything like it. People don't just vanish, they leave something behind. DNA, personal items, signs of a struggle. There's always something, except this time there wasn't. The investigation that followed considered every possibility. Had the teenagers run away together? Their bank accounts remained untouched, their most prized possessions left in their bedrooms. College acceptance letters still pinned to bulletin boards. Was it a kidnapping? No ransom demands were ever made. No suspicious vehicles were reported in the area. The trail entrance required a 4-mile hike from the nearest road accessible by car. Could it have been murder? Without bodies or a crime scene, investigators had nothing to go on. The theories grew more desperate as weeks turned to months. Some suggested a wild animal attack, perhaps a pack of wolves or a mountain lion, but wildlife experts quickly dismissed this idea. Even in the case of a predator, evidence would have been left behind: torn clothing, blood, signs of a struggle. Others pointed to the treacherous terrain, sinkholes, unstable cliffs, abandoned mining shafts from the area's gold rush days. Extensive searches of these hazards yielded nothing. As fall turned to winter and the Blackfall Ridge trails disappeared under feet of snow, the active search was officially suspended. The case remained open, but leaves had run dry. For the families of the missing teenagers, the nightmare of not knowing had only just begun. The hardest part is the silence, reads a journal entry from Eliza Winter's father, found after his death from heart failure in 2006. Not the silence from the police or the FBI, though that's unbearable too. It's the silence from Eliza. No calls, no letters, not even a proper goodbye. Just the echo of her laughter from that morning, fading a little more each day until I strained to remember what my own daughter's voice sounded like. In the years that followed, the case of the Pinecrest Five became something of a dark legend in the Pacific Northwest. Amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts pored over the limited available evidence. Podcasts dedicated episodes to speculating what might have happened on Blackfall Ridge. The story appeared on Unsolved Mysteries in 2002, generating hundreds of tips, none of which led anywhere substantial. And through it all, the families waited, hoped, grieved without closure. Trevor Foster's room remained untouched for 7 years, exactly as he left it that June morning. Posters of Nirvana and Pearl Jam on the walls, a half-finished model airplane on the desk, an unmade bed. His mother, Sandra, would dust it weekly, as if expecting him to walk through the door at any moment. Vanessa McKay's parents divorced within a year of her disappearance. The strain of their grief, too much for their marriage to bear. Daniel Porter's younger sister, only 10 when he vanished, would eventually become a search and rescue volunteer, dedicating her life to finding the lost. Jackson Palmer's father died in 2010 without ever knowing what happened to his son. Among his personal effects was a handwritten letter, never sent, addressed simply to "Whoever took my boy. I just want to know why," the letter reads. "I just want to bring him home." The investigation wasn't completely stagnant during these years. Every new sheriff of Pinecrest County inherited the case as a priority. Every few years, as technology advanced, the limited evidence would be re-examined. The security footage from Dale's General Store was enhanced multiple times. The teenagers' personal computers' clunky desktops from the late 90s were analyzed for any clues they might have left behind. In 2008, a partial fingerprint found on Eliza Winter's bedroom window was run through an improved FBI database. In 2015, the area around the trailhead was excavated after ground-penetrating radar indicated what might have been disturbed soil. The anomaly turned out to be an old septic tank from a long-demolished ranger station. Dead end after dead end. Until 3 months ago, on June 17, 2023, exactly 25 years to the day since the Pinecrest Five disappeared, a hidden wildlife camera captured something unexpected in a remote section of Blackfall Ridge. Nearly 7 miles from the main trail, wildlife biologist Dr. Rebecca Hammond had set up the motion-activated camera as part of a study tracking the movements of a recently reintroduced wolf pack. Once a month, she would hike to the various camera locations, replace the memory cards, and analyze the footage back at her university lab. What she found on this particular camera defied explanation. At first, I thought it was a equipment malfunction, Dr. Hammond explained in her report to authorities. The timestamps were corrupted, jumping erratically. The footage itself was distorted, with unusual light artifacts that I couldn't explain. I was about to discard it entirely when I noticed a figure. A singular human form, captured in 3 frames spanning approximately 4 seconds of footage. The quality is poor, the lighting worse. The figure appears to be a young person, estimated to be in their late teens or early 20s based on height and build. They are wearing what looks like a red jacket with a dark backpack. Their face is not visible, turned away from the camera. What made this sighting extraordinary wasn't just its location miles from any marked trail in an area so remote it had been searched only once during the initial investigation. It was the jacket. Vanessa McKay had been wearing a distinctive red Columbia windbreaker the day she disappeared. Her mother had purchased it as an early graduation present just 2 weeks before the hike. In the security footage from Dale's general store, it's clearly visible as she pays for her magazine. Could this blurry figure, captured 25 years to the day after the disappearance, be Vanessa McKay? If so, how could she look exactly the same age as when she vanished? And why would she return to Blackfall Ridge after all this time? Sheriff Laura Daniels, who took office in Pinecrest County just last year, approached the discovery with cautious optimism. "We are not jumping to conclusions," she stated at a press conference held after news of the footage leaked. "We are treating this as a potential lead in an ongoing investigation, nothing more at this time." Behind the scenes, however, the case had exploded back to life. A task force was quietly assembled, combining local officers who knew the terrain with FBI analysts specializing in cold cases and digital forensics. The footage was sent to the FBI's laboratory in Quantico, where specialists worked to enhance the images and authenticate the timestamp. Their preliminary findings were troubling. The camera itself shows no signs of tampering, says FBI technical analyst Dr. Jeffrey Wen. The corrupted timestamps appear to be the result of some kind of electromagnetic interference that affected the camera's internal clock. This same interference created the visual anomalies in the footage. When pressed about what could cause such interference, Dr. Wen hesitates. "We don't have a definitive explanation. It's not consistent with known natural phenomena in the air. There are no power lines, no radio towers, no military installations that could generate fields of this magnitude." What he doesn't say, what the official reports carefully dance around, is that the pattern of interference is unlike anything previously documented in scientific literature. For the families of the missing, the footage reignited both hope and pain that had dulled but never truly faded over 25 years. "I recognized that jacket immediately," says Caroline McKay, Vanessa's mother, her hands trembling as she peers at the enhanced still images. "I bought it for her at Wilderness Outfitters in town. She was so excited about it. Red was always her color." Caroline pauses, struggling to maintain her composure. But how can this be her, after all this time, looking exactly the same? It's the question everyone is asking. And as the investigation accelerated, more strange details began to emerge. Following the discovery of the wildlife camera footage, authorities made the decision to conduct a new, thorough search of Blackfall Ridge, focusing on the remote area where the figure had been spotted. What they found only deepened the mystery. Approximately 200 yards from where the camera had been positioned, search teams discovered an unusual clearing in the forest that didn't appear on any topographical maps. Perfectly circular, roughly 40 feet in diameter, with all vegetation dead or dying trees, underbrush, even moss. Soil samples taken from the clearing showed inexplicable anomalies. Trace elements that shouldn't exist naturally in the region. Radiation levels slightly above normal background, though not dangerous. And most bizarrely, a complete absence of insects or microbial life. "It's as if something sterilized this entire area," explains Dr. Amara Patel, a geologist brought in to analyze the site. "The pattern suggests a sudden, intense event rather than gradual environmental contamination. If I had to make a comparison, I'd say it resembles the aftermath of a lightning strike, but magnified many times over and perfectly uniform throughout the clearing. No human remains or personal effects were found in or near the clearing. No footprints led to or from it, despite the soft, loamy soil of the surrounding forest floor. As baffling as these discoveries were, they paled in comparison to what happened next. On July 3, 2023, 16 days after the figure was captured on camera, Dale Thurman, the owner of the general store where the teenagers were last seen in 1998, reported a strange encounter. It was just after closing, around 9:30 p.m., Dale told Sheriff Daniels. "I was counting the till when I heard knocking at the front door. Figured it was probably someone needing emergency supplies, which happens sometimes. When I looked up, there was this young man standing outside." Dale's description of the visitor sent chills through the investigation team. A teenager, approximately 18 years old, wearing clothes that seemed oddly out-of-date cargo shorts, a flannel shirt tied around his waist, a dark t-shirt with a Pearl Jam logo. He had dirty blonde hair in a style popular in the late 90s. He looked exactly like Daniel Porter. "I'd nearly had a heart attack right there," Dale continued. "I have had the same picture of those 5 kids on my bulletin board for 25 years. I'd know Daniel's face anywhere, but it couldn't be him. It couldn't be." According to Dale, when he moved toward the door, the young man backed away, then turned and ran toward the forest edge, disappearing into the darkness. Dale immediately called the sheriff's office. By the time deputies arrived, there was no sign of the mysterious visitor. A search of the surrounding area yielded nothing. However, the store's newly installed security camera had captured the incident. The footage, which has not been released to the public, reportedly shows a young man matching Daniel Porter's description, standing at the store's entrance for approximately 40 seconds before fleeing. Like the wildlife camera footage, this video suffered from similar unexplained distortions and light artifacts. The similarities between the two videos are too significant to be coincidental, confirms FBI technical analyst Joshua Mutter. They show identical electromagnetic signatures affecting the digital recording equipment. Within days of Dale Thurman's encounter, the story broke nationally. News vans descended on Pinecrest. The once wild town found itself at the center of a media frenzy. Theories ranged from the rational, elaborate hoaxes, mistaken identities, mass hallucination, to the fantastic time slips, alternate dimensions, alien abduction. The families of the Pinecrest Five found themselves reliving the nightmare of 1998, but now with the additional trauma of false hope and public spectacle. Through it all, one question remained at the forefront. If these were indeed 2 of the missing teenagers, somehow unchanged after 25 years, where had they been, and why were they returning now? The answer, or at least a clue to it, came from an unexpected source. Margaret Palmer, Jackson's mother, now in her 70s and suffering from early-stage dementia, had been moved to assisted living facility in 2019. Her apartment had been cleared out, her possessions either donated or distributed among relatives. A small storage unit contained the items no one had the heart to discard: photo albums, keepsakes, and several boxes of Jackson's belongings. Following the news of the recent sightings, Jackson's cousin Timothy Palmer decided to go through these boxes, hoping to find something that might help the investigation. In a shoebox containing Jackson's personal effects, his wallet, keys, watch, and other items he hadn't taken on the hike, Timothy discovered something unusual. A small notebook with a black cover, with pages filled with Jackson's handwriting. The notebook hadn't been mentioned in any of the original investigative reports. It hadn't been among the items police catalogued from Jackson's room in 1998. By all accounts, it shouldn't have existed. Yet here it was, containing what appeared to be journal entries dated from the week before the fateful hike. The final entry was dated June 16, 1998, the day before the teenagers disappeared. "I don't know how to explain what we found," Jackson wrote. "None of us do. Trevor thinks it's some kind of government thing. Vanessa says that's stupid. Eliza's scared. She wanted to tell her parents, but Daniel convinced her we should check it out ourselves first. We are going back tomorrow, just the 5 of us. If what we saw is still there, we will decide what to do next. If not, no one needs to know. No one would believe us anyway." The entry ends there, frustratingly vague and open to interpretation. What had they found? Where exactly had they found it? And why hadn't any of them told their parents or authorities? Timothy immediately turned the notebook over to Sheriff Daniels, who brought in Dr. Elaine Harper, a forensic document examiner, to authenticate it. The handwriting is consistent with the samples we have from Jackson Palmer, Dr. Harper confirmed, after a thorough analysis. The paper and ink are also consistent with materials available in the late 1097-7. There's no evidence of fabrication or tampering. The discovery of the notebook shifted the entire trajectory of the investigation. It suggested that the 5 teenagers hadn't been on a simple hiking trip after all. They had a specific destination in mind, some place they had discovered earlier, and whatever they found there was unusual enough that they believed others might not believe them. Armed with this new information, investigators returned to the original case files with fresh eyes. They re-interviewed friends and teachers of the Pinecrest Five, asking specifically about any unusual behavior in the weeks leading up to their disappearance. Slowly, a new narrative began to emerge. Approximately 2 weeks before they vanished, the 5 friends had gone on another, shorter hike on Blackfall Ridge. According to classmates, they had been unusually secretive about this trip upon their return. Several people recalled them huddling together at lunch, speaking in whispers, falling silent whenever anyone approached. They were acting weird that whole last week of school, remembers Heather Jansen, who sat behind Eliza in AP English. Like they had this big secret. I asked Eliza what was going on and she just said they'd seen something cool in the woods and were going back to check it out after graduation. I figured it was like a swimming hole or a cave or something. Another classmate, Brian Murphy, recalled a strange comment from Trevor. We were at this party the weekend before they disappeared. Trevor had a few beers and started saying all this weird stuff about how time wasn't what we thought it was, how there were places where it bent or folded or something. Jackson told him to shut up. I thought he was just drunk and talking nonsense. Perhaps most telling was a conversation between Daniel Porter and his physics teacher, Dr. Raymond Norris, now retired. Daniel stayed after class one day. Dr. Norris recounted. He asked me these very specific questions about theoretical physics, wormholes, Einstein-Rosen bridges, relativity, way beyond the high school curriculum. When I asked why he was interested, he said something like just trying to explain something we saw. I encouraged him to elaborate, but he clammed up, said it was just for a personal project. None of these accounts had been given much weight in the original investigation. Without context, they seemed like typical teenage behavior secrets, inside jokes, newfound intellectual interests. But in light of Jackson's notebook and the recent sightings, they took on new significance. The investigation now focused on determining exactly what the teenagers might have discovered during their earlier hike, and where on Blackfall Ridge it might be located. Using the limited information available, investigators created a probability map of the areas the teenagers most likely explored on their earlier trip. They narrowed it down to a 5-square-mile region on the northeastern slope of the ridge, not far from where the wildlife camera had captured the figure in the red jacket. This region contained several points of interest. An old fire lookout tower, abandoned in the 1980s. It was this last location that drew particular attention. Very little official documentation existed about the research station, just a few permits filed with the Forestry Department and some old survey maps. According to these records, the facility had been decommissioned and dismantled in 1979, after just 3 years of operation. But when search teams located the site, they found something unexpected. While most of the station's structures had indeed been removed, a concrete bunker remained, partially hidden by 25 years of forest growth. Its heavy metal door was secured with a padlock that showed signs of recent tampering. Inside the bunker, searchers found a scene that defied easy explanation. The small room, approximately 15 feet square, was empty except for a metal table bolted to the floor in the center. The walls were lined with what appeared to be copper mesh. There were no windows, no other furniture, no equipment of any kind. but on the table lay 5 objects: a wristwatch with a cracked face, stopped at 3:27, a disposable camera, the kind popular in the 1990s, a silver charm bracelet, a pocket knife with the initials TFT carved into the handle, and a pager. These items were quickly identified as belonging to the Pinecrest Five. The watch was Jackson's, a graduation gift from his father. The charm bracelet was Eliza's, the camera Trevor's, the knife Trevor's, and the pager Daniel's. 5 personal items, one from each missing teenager, arranged in a deliberate circle on the metal table. The disposable camera contained an undeveloped roll of film. When processed, 23 of the 24 exposures were completely black, as if the film had been exposed to light. The final frame, however, showed a blurry image that photo analysts tentatively identified as the circular clearing discovered after the wildlife camera sighting. The pager's memory contained a single saved message, received at 3:27 p.m. on June 17, 1998, the time shown on Jackson's stopwatch. The message consisted of just 9 digits, 72,348,991. Cryptographers have yet to determine if this is a code, a phone number, or some other form of communication. As for the watch, preliminary analysis indicates that it didn't simply stop running. The internal mechanism shows signs of exposure to an intense electromagnetic field that literally fused some of the components together. These discoveries raise far more questions than they answer, admits Sheriff Daniels. How did these items get into a locked bunker that wasn't even included in the original search? Why these specific personal effects? And what do they mean arranged the way they were? The investigation has now expanded to include the history of the research station itself. What was the government really studying there in the 1976 Wadi? Why was it shut down after just 3 years? And is there any connection to what the teenagers discovered in 1998? Requests for information from the Department of Energy and the National Weather Service have been met with bureaucratic delays. A Freedom of Information Act filing is currently pending, but investigators have been told the process could take months, if not years. In the meantime, the sightings had continued. Following Dale Thurman's encounter with the young man resembling Daniel Porter, 3 more sightings have been reported in and around Pinecrest. A night shift nurse at Pinecrest Memorial Hospital reported seeing a teenage girl, matching Eliza Winter's description, staring at the parking lot, staring up at the building's windows. By the time security responded, the girl was gone. 2 hikers on a trail near the Blackfall Ridge trailhead claimed to have passed a young man who looked like Trevor Foster, carrying what they described as old-fashioned photography equipment. When they turned to speak to him, he was nowhere to be seen. Most disturbing was the report from Margaret Palmer, Jackson's mother, who insisted that her son had visited her in the assisted living facility. Staff initially attributed this to her dementia, until a security camera in the hallway outside her room captured a brief image of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to Jackson Palmer based on photographs from 1998. Like all the previous footage, this video suffered from severe distortion and electromagnetic interference. Each sighting has followed the same pattern: a brief appearance of a figure resembling one of the Pinecrest Five, now seemingly the same age as when they disappeared 25 years ago, electronic interference affecting any nearby devices, and a swift disappearance before meaningful contact can be established. The teenagers never speak. They never approach too closely. They simply appear, observe, and vanish. It's like they are trying to communicate something, suggests FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Morgan Hayes. Or perhaps they are looking for something. These aren't random appearances. Each location has a connection to their lives before they disappeared, places that were significant to them. As speculation runs rampant through traditional and social media, the families of the missing teenagers find themselves torn between hope and a deeper kind of fear. 45 years I have lived with not knowing, says Sandra Foster, Trevor's mother. I have imagined every possible scenario: that he was dead, that he'd been taken, that he was somehow living a new life somewhere else. But this I never imagined. If that's really my son out there, unchanged after all this time, then what happened to him? Where has he been? And why can't he just come home? These questions haunt not just the families, but everyone involved in the investigation. The evidence points to something beyond conventional explanation, something that science, at least as we currently understand it, struggles to account for. Dr. Liam Harrison, a theoretical physicist consulted by the FBI, has put forward one of the more radical interpretations of the available evidence. If we take all the data at face value, Dr. Harrison explains, we are potentially looking at a localized temporal phenomenon. In layman's terms, a disruption in the normal flow of time. The circular clearing, the electromagnetic interference, the apparent age of the individuals, these are all consistent with certain theoretical models of closed time-like curves. When pressed on what might cause such a phenomenon, Dr. Harrison becomes more cautious. That's where we move from theoretical physics into pure speculation. Natural phenomena that could cause this kind of effect are not known to exist on Earth. If this is real and not some elaborate hoax, then we are dealing with something unprecedented in recorded scientific history. Despite, or perhaps because of the extraordinary nature of the case, the investigation continues to move forward. Additional wildlife cameras have been placed throughout Blackfall Ridge, particularly near the bunker and the circular clearing. 24-hour surveillance has been established at locations connected to the teenagers' lives, their former homes, the school they attended, places they frequented. The families have been offered protection and support, both to shield them from media intrusion and to prepare them for possible additional encounters. And through it all, the question remains, what really happened to the Pinecrest Five on June 17, 1998? Where have they been for 25 years? And why are they returning now, unchanged by time, visible but somehow untouchable? As Sheriff Daniels puts it, we are dealing with a mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew, but at the heart of it are 5 families who deserve answers. 5 young people who deserve to come home, if that's still possible. The investigation recently took yet another unexpected turn, when analysis of soil samples from the circular clearing revealed something extraordinary. Microscopic fragments of what appears to be the same type of copper mesh, found lining the walls of the concrete bunker. This discovery suggests a direct connection between the bunker, presumably part of the government research station, and whatever phenomena created the clearing. It also lends credence to the theory that the teenagers may have stumbled upon something in 1998 that was left behind when the station was decommissioned in 1979. But the most significant breakthrough came just 3 days ago. During a routine check of the surveillance equipment around Blackfall Ridge, a technical team discovered that one of the wildlife cameras near the circular clearing was missing. In its place was a small pile of what appeared to be ash or fine dark powder. Initial analysis of this substance has yielded baffling results. While primarily organic in composition, it contains trace elements not found naturally on Earth, as well as microscopic crystalline structures that lab technicians have been unable to identify. More troubling still is what was found approximately 10 feet from where the camera had been mounted. A small Polaroid photograph, seemingly recent despite the outdated medium. The image shows the 5 missing teenagers, Jackson, Eliza, Trevor, Vanessa, and Daniel, standing together at the edge of the circular clearing. They look exactly as they did in 1998, down to their clothing and hairstyles. They are not smiling. Their expressions could best be described as urgent, perhaps even fearful. Written on the white border of the photograph, in handwriting matched to Jackson Palmer's, are 6 words. We are running out of time. The implications of this message, its authenticity, its meaning, the method of its delivery, are still being assessed by the investigative team. But one thing is increasingly clear. Whatever happened to the Pinecrest 5 years ago, their story is far from over. And as darkness falls once again over Blackfall Ridge, the search for answers continues. The Polaroid photograph of the Pinecrest Five changed everything. It was the first concrete proof that all 5 teenagers are somewhere, explains FBI Special Agent Natalia Rivera, who joined the task force after the discovery at the circular clearing. Not just glimpses of individuals on corrupted video footage, but all 5 together, seemingly alive and unchanged. 25 years after they vanished, forensic analysis of the photograph confirmed what many already suspected. It was genuine. The Polaroid film was consistent with stock produced in 2023, not 1998, ruling out the possibility that it was an old photo somehow left in the woods. Extensive digital examination found no evidence of tampering or manipulation. The image itself contained subtle details that matched the teenagers' appearances from 1998, details that would be nearly impossible to recreate artificially. It was real, which meant they were real. The message written on the border, "We are running out of time," took on ominous significance. Was it a cry for help? A warning? And what deadline were they approaching? For the families, the photograph was both miraculous and heartbreaking. Finally, proof that their children had survived, somehow, but the expressions on their faces, the fear, the urgency, suggested they were in danger. "I just want to hold her again," Caroline McKay said, when shown the image of her daughter Vanessa. "She looks so scared. What kind of mother am I if I can't help my own child?" The investigation accelerated to unprecedented levels. The FBI brought in specialized equipment to monitor the Blackfall Ridge area for electromagnetic anomalies. The Department of Energy finally responded to inquiries about the abandoned research station, though their answers created more questions than clarity. According to heavily redacted documents reluctantly provided through FOIA requests, the facility had indeed been established in 1976 for what was described only as atmospheric research. The project, codenamed SUNDIAL, was officially terminated in 1979, following what the documents referred to as unexpected results during Trial 37B. All equipment was supposedly removed, all structures dismantled, and the site returned to its natural state. Any further details about the nature of the research, or the reasons for its termination, remained classified under national security provisions. When pressed further, DOE representatives would only say that the project had been deemed scientifically unviable and that it held no relevance to current energy initiatives. Dr. Mara Patel, the geologist who had analyzed the soil from the circular clearing, found this explanation suspicious. "Typical government stonewalling," she commented off the record. "Whatever they were doing up there in the 70s, it wasn't simple atmospheric research. The composition of the soil, the copper mesh in the bunker, the electromagnetic signatures we are detecting now, all of it points to something far more exotic." Dr. Patel's suspicions seemed confirmed when her own academic background check was flagged by the Defense Intelligence Agency 3 days after she made these comments. She was briefly detained and questioned about her involvement in the Pinecrest investigation, before being released with a warning about discussing matters of national security. This heavy-handed response only fueled speculation that the government was hiding something significant about the Blackfall Ridge research station and its possible connection to the missing teenagers. Meanwhile, the sightings continued, becoming more frequent and increasingly bold. On August 12, 2023, Trevor Foster's camera was discovered on the front porch of his childhood home, now occupied by a young family with no connection to the case. The disposable camera contained a full roll of film that, when developed, showed 24 images of the circular clearing taken from various angles and distances. Several photos captured strange light phenomena, perfect spheres of luminescence hovering above the ground, streaks that resembled lighting but moved horizontally, and in one particularly unsettling image, what appeared to be a human figure completely enveloped in a blue-white glow. 3 days later, a package addressed to Sheriff Daniels arrived at the Pinecrest County Sheriff's Office. Inside was Daniel Porter's journal, the pages filled with complex mathematical equations, diagrams of the circular clearing, and fragmented notes about temporal displacement and phase shifting. and the window closing on September 17. The handwriting matched Daniel's from 1998, but the content suggested knowledge far beyond what a high school student should possess. Advanced physics concepts that would challenge even graduate-level researchers. "It's as if he's had decades to study these phenomena," noted Dr. Harrison after reviewing the journal. "But the physical evidence suggests he hasn't aged a day since 1998. The contradiction is mind-boggling. Most significantly, the journal contained coordinates, precise latitude and longitude measurements for a location approximately half a mile from the circular clearing, along with a specific date and time, September 17, 2023, at 3:27 p.m., exactly 3 months after the initial wildlife camera sighting, and at the exact time shown on Jackson Palmer's stopwatch. The message couldn't be clearer. The Pinecrest Five were orchestrating a meeting. As preparations began for what might be a historic encounter, the investigation took yet another unexpected turn. Margaret Palmer, Jackson's mother, suffered a severe stroke on August 20th. As she lay in the hospital drifting in and out of consciousness, she began speaking about events from 1998, as if they were happening in real time. "Jackson came to see me last night," she told her night nurse. "He said they found a tear in the world up on the ridge, a place where time runs backwards and forwards all at once. The government men made it in the 70s, he said. They were trying to see the future, but they created a loop instead. Now the kids are trapped in it, going around and around." Medical staff attributed these comments to the stroke and her pre-existing dementia. But when she continued to provide specific details about the research station that weren't public knowledge, FBI agents began recording her statements. "They need to close the loop," Margaret insisted. "That's what Jackson told me. They have been trying for 25 years, but they can only reach through at certain times, when the membrane is thinnest. They need help from our side, something to anchor them." On August 23rd, Margaret Palmer died peacefully in her sleep. That same night, every electronic device in the hospital's West Wing, where her room was located, experienced simultaneous failure for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. When systems came back online, security footage showed a brief glimpse of 5 teenage figures standing in the hallway outside Margaret's room, their heads bowed as if in mourning. By now, the case had attracted international attention. News crews maintained a constant presence in Pinecrest. Online forums overflowed with theories ranging from government experiments gone wrong to alien abduction, to elaborate hoaxes. Several prominent scientists publicly questioned their own understanding of physics in light of the mounting evidence. Religious groups descended on the town, some declaring the teenagers to be angels, others warning of demonic deception. New Age spiritualists conducted rituals at the trailhead of Blackfall Ridge, attempting to balance the energies and open the gateway for the missing teenagers to return fully. Through it all, the families of the Pinecrest Five struggled to maintain their privacy and emotional equilibrium. For them, this wasn't about physics or conspiracy theories or spiritual awakening. It was about their children, real people who had been lost and might finally be found. As September 17th approached, tension mounted. The coordinates from Daniel's journal led to a small plateau overlooking a steep ravine. The area was secured by FBI agents, with a perimeter established to keep away the curious and the cameras. Only essential personnel would be present for the potential encounter. Sheriff Daniels, FBI agent Rivera, Dr. Harrison, and 1 family member for each of the missing teenagers. No recording equipment would be allowed, as all previous evidence suggested electronic devices malfunctioned in the presence of the phenomena. In the days leading up to the meeting, the plateau became the site of strange occurrences. Wildlife avoided the area entirely. Plants began to wither within a 30-foot radius of the exact coordinates. At night, hikers on distant trails reported seeing unusual lights hovering above the location, and in Pinecrest itself, residents experienced odd temporal anomalies. Clocks ran too fast or too slow. People reported brief moments of déjà vu so intense they became physically disoriented. Several individuals claimed to have seen their own doppelgangers walking through town, perfect copies of themselves that vanished when approached. The fabric of local space-time is becoming unstable, Dr. Harrison explained at an emergency briefing on September 16th. Whatever is happening on Blackfall Ridge is beginning to affect a wider area. If the pattern continues to expand, we could be looking at temporal distortions affecting the entire county, possibly beyond. When asked what might happen at the meeting the following day, Dr. Harrison could only speculate. Best case scenario, the teenagers return fully to our time stream. Worst case, the instability accelerates, creating a cascading effect that could potentially tear apart the local space-time continuum. At 2:45 p.m. on September 17th, the small group of authorized personnel arrived at the plateau. The air felt heavy, charged with static electricity that made hair stand on end and skin tingle. The withered vegetation had expanded to cover the entire plateau, creating an environment that resembled deep winter despite the late summer season. They arranged themselves in a loose circle around the exact coordinates, waiting in tense silence as 3:27 p.m. approached. Sandra Foster, Trevor's mother, was the first to notice the change. "The air," she whispered. "Look at the air." At the center of their circle, the atmosphere seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The distortion grew stronger, expanding outward until it formed a rough sphere about 10 feet in diameter. Within this sphere, light bent in impossible ways, creating prismatic effects that hurt the eyes to look at directly. At exactly 3:27 p.m., the distortion collapsed inward with a sound like thunder, then exploded outward in a silent wave of force that knocked everyone to the ground. And there they were, the Pinecrest Five, standing in a tight cluster at the center of the coordinates, looking exactly as they had in 1998, young, frightened, but very much real. For one frozen moment, no one moved. The teenagers stared at their aged parents. The parents stared at their unaged children. The impossible made flesh. Then the silence shattered as families rushed toward each other. But before they could make contact, Jackson Palmer raised his hand in warning. "Don't touch us," he called out, his voice strange and echoing, as if coming from both far away and inside their heads simultaneously. "We are not fully here yet. We are still phasing in and out." Indeed, upon closer inspection, the teenagers weren't entirely solid. Light passed partly through them, giving them a translucent quality. Occasionally, parts of their bodies, a hand, a foot, the edge of a face would flicker and momentarily disappear before resolving again. "We don't have much time," Eliza Winters said, her voice carrying the same otherworldly echo. "The window is closing. Once it does, we won't be able to reach through again for another 25 years. Dr. Harrison stepped forward cautiously. "What happened to you? Where have you been?" The five exchanged glances before Daniel Porter answered. "Time isn't linear the way you think it is. It's more like a fabric that can fold back on itself. In 1998, we found a tear in that fabric, something left behind by the SUNDIAL project. We were curious," Trevor added. "We stepped through, thinking we could just step back, but it doesn't work that way. Once you are inside the loop, you are caught in it." "We have been living the same 3 months over and over," Vanessa explained, "from June 17th to September 17th, 1998. When we reach the end, we snap back to the beginning. We don't age, we don't die, we just repeat." The implications were staggering. For what had been 25 years of grief and wondering for their families, the teenagers had experienced just 3 months of time, repeated in an endless loop. "At first we tried everything to get back," Jackson continued. "We tried returning to the exact spot where we crossed over. We tried at different times of day in different weather. Nothing worked. Then we realized the tear was getting smaller," Daniel said, "healing itself. We could feel it. Each cycle it was harder to sense your world at all. But Daniel figured out the pattern," Eliza added with a touch of pride. "The mathematics of it. The tear becomes penetrable at regular intervals once every 25 of your years, for about 1 of your months. That's why we have been able to appear to you recently. The boundary between our loop and your linear timeline is at its thinnest right now. And today, Trevor said, at this exact time, at these exact coordinates, it's possible for us to cross back completely. But we need an anchor, something to pull us through and hold us here. What kind of anchor? Sheriff Daniels asked. Emotional connection, Vanessa replied. Memory, the same forces that have kept us connected to this world even while trapped in the loop. That's why we have been appearing to people who care about us. Parents, friends, people who remember us. We have been trying to build up the connection, strengthen it enough to pull us across. As they spoke, the teenagers' forms wavered more violently. Parts of them would vanish for several seconds before reappearing. The air around them crackled with energy. It's starting to close, Jackson warned. We need to do it now. What followed was unlike anything the witnesses would ever be able to properly articulate afterward. Each family member was instructed to focus on their strongest memories of their missing child. Not the grief or longing of the past 25 years, but the joy, the love, the concrete details of who they had been. As they concentrated, the air around the teenagers began to glow with threads of light that stretched outward, connecting to their loved ones. Each memory shared seemed to strengthen these connections, making the teenagers appear more solid, more present. Sandra Foster talked about teaching Trevor to ride a bike, the determination on his face when he finally balanced on his own. Caroline McKay recalled Vanessa singing in the school talent show, her voice filling the auditorium. Eliza's father spoke of their fishing trips, how she always insisted on releasing what they caught. With each story, each remembered moment, the threads of light grew brighter, pulling the teenagers more fully into the present timeline. But it wasn't enough. The window was closing too quickly. The connections weren't strong enough to anchor all five completely. We need more, Daniel shouted over the rising whine of energy around them. More connections, more memories. That's when Sheriff Daniels made a decision that would later be called both reckless and inspired. She grabbed her radio, which had been silent since their arrival, affected by the electromagnetic disturbance, and switched to the emergency broadcast channel. This is Sheriff Daniels, she announced. To anyone who can hear me, if you knew Jackson Palmer, Eliza Winters, Trevor Foster, Vanessa McKay, or Daniel Porter, I need you to think about them right now. Remember them. Every detail. Focus on those memories with everything you have. Her transmission, distorted but audible, reached patrol cars throughout the county. Deputies relayed the message through landlines to the emergency broadcast system. Within minutes, the request was spreading through Pinecrest and beyond. Former teachers put down their coffee cups and closed their eyes, remembering bright students from 25 years ago. Childhood friends stopped what they were doing and focused on summer days long past. The entire town of Pinecrest, it seemed, paused to remember the 5 teenagers who had vanished a generation before. On the plateau, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The threads of light multiplied exponentially, shooting out in all directions toward the town, across the county, perhaps farther. The air filled with a low humming that vibrated in the bones of everyone present. The teenagers grew more solid with each passing second, as the collective memories of an entire community anchored them to the present. It's working, Eliza called out, her voice losing its echo, becoming more natural. We can feel it. One by one, they stepped forward, crossing an invisible threshold. As they did, color flooded back into their forms. The translucency vanished. They became fully corporeal, real, solid, present. Jackson was the last to cross. As he stepped forward, a violent surge of energy erupted from where he had been standing. The air seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of light and darkness. For one brief moment, the witnesses caught a glimpse of what looked like Blackfall Ridge. But wrong somehow, the trees too small, the colors too bright, everything slightly out of phase with reality. Then the tear sealed itself with a thunderclap that knocked everyone to the ground once more. When they looked up, the distortion was gone. The air was clear, and the Pinecrest Five stood before them solid, real, and finally home. What followed was both joyous and deeply disorienting. The teenagers fell into the arms of family members they had last seen only 3 subjective months ago, who were now 25 years older. Parents embraced children who hadn't aged a day since 1998. The gap between teen and adult now reversed. The medical and scientific aftermath was equally complex. Physically, the Pinecrest Five were exactly as they had been in 1998, down to the cellular level, according to initial examinations. Their bodies showed no signs of aging, no physical trauma, not even the normal wear and tear of 3 months of hiking. Psychologically, however, they had experienced something unique in human history. While they had lived through only 3 linear months of time, they had repeated those months countless times, possibly hundreds of cycles by their own estimation. Though they had eventually stopped counting, time becomes fluid when you are in a loop. Daniel tried to explain during his first official debriefing. You start to experience it differently. Past, present, future, they blur together. We could feel the weight of repetition even if we couldn't track it precisely. The 5 remained remarkably sane despite their ordeal, a fact that astonished psychologists. They attributed their mental stability to having each other 5 people experiencing the same impossible situation, able to confirm each other's reality and provide emotional support. They also revealed that the loop hadn't been a perfect repetition. Small variations occurred in each cycle, allowing them to try different approaches to escaping. They had explored every inch of Blackfall Ridge within their loop, documented the phenomena they encountered, and gradually pieced together the underlying mathematics of their situation. Daniel was the key, Jackson explained. He had this intuitive grasp of the physics involved. Each cycle he refined his understanding, got us closer to a solution. When asked how Daniel had acquired such advanced knowledge, Trevor laughed. When you are stuck repeating the same 3 months forever, you have a lot of time to think about your situation. We all became experts in our own way. Eliza mapped the geographical boundaries of the loop. Vanessa tracked the energy fluctuations. I documented everything visually. Jackson kept us organized, focused on finding a way out. We had to become something more than what we were, Daniel added quietly. The kids who went into the woods in 1998 couldn't have solved this. But we evolved, cycle by cycle. We had to. As for what created the time loop in the first place, the full truth may never be known. The government continues to classify most information related to Project SUNDIAL, revealing only that it was an early attempt to study temporal physics that was abandoned when unexpected side effects emerged. Dr. Harrison and his colleagues have proposed that the researchers in the 1970s accidentally created a localized temporal anomaly, a bubble of space-time that folded back on itself. When they realized what they had done, they shut down the project and sealed the bunker, hoping the anomaly would dissipate. Instead, it persisted for decades, weakening gradually but remaining strong enough to trap the unwary teenagers who stumbled upon it in 1998. Think of it like a whirlpool in a river, Dr. Harrison explained in a paper published 6 months after the events. Even after you remove whatever created the disturbance, the swirling pattern can persist for some time, growing weaker but still capable of trapping objects that venture too close. The return of the Pinecrest Five has raised profound questions about the nature of time, consciousness, and reality itself. Scientists from around the world have flocked to Blackfall Ridge, hoping to study what remains of the temporal anomaly, though readings suggest it has finally dissipated completely following the teenagers' return. For the 5 themselves, reintegration into linear time has been a complex process. Physically 18, but with the experiences and perspectives of people who have lived through something extraordinary. They occupy a unique place in society, not quite their original ages, yet not as old as the years would suggest. They have remained inseparable, supporting each other through adjustment to a world that advanced 25 years while they were caught in their loop. Cell phones, the internet, social media, all of it new to them, yet they adapt with remarkable speed. To have experienced time folding in on itself, Vanessa observed. Learning how to use Instagram doesn't seem that complicated. Their relationships with their families have required the most delicate navigation. Parents who grieved for 25 years now find themselves caring for teenagers who, in some ways, have become more independent than they are. The expected trajectory of growing up, moving away, building separate lives, has been fundamentally altered. For some, like Eliza's father, the reunion has been a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild a relationship he thought was lost forever. For others, like Trevor's mother, it has meant learning to connect with a child who has been profoundly changed by experiences she can barely comprehend. The wider community of Pinecrest has embraced its returned children with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and protective concern. The shared act of remembering that helped anchor the teenagers to the present timeline created a unique bond between the five and their hometown, a connection that transcends the 25-year gap. As for the Pinecrest Five themselves, they face an uncertain but boundless future. Colleges have offered scholarships, documentary filmmakers have proposed projects, scientists have requested collaborations to understand the physics of what they experienced, but for now they have chosen a quieter path. They live together in a house on the edge of Pinecrest, funded by a foundation established to support them. They spend their days writing down everything they can remember about their time in the loop, working with select researchers to expand humanity's understanding of temporal physics, and simply experiencing the joy of living in a world where time moves only forward. "We have had enough adventure for several lifetimes," Jackson explained at the one-year anniversary of their return. "Now we just want to experience normal life, if there is such a thing after what we have been through. There are still unanswered questions, of course. The exact nature of Project SUNDIAL remains classified. The full extent of the teenagers' experiences within the loop may never be completely documented. The long-term effects of their temporal displacement are still being studied. But perhaps the most profound question is one that Daniel Porter raised during a rare public lecture at MIT, 8 months after their return. Time isn't the rigid linear progression we have always assumed, he asked the stunned audience. What else about our reality might be more flexible than we think? What other fundamental assumptions might be waiting to be challenged by those willing to step beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding? On Blackfall Ridge, the circular clearing has begun to show signs of new growth. Saplings have taken root where nothing would grow for months after the teenagers' return. Wildlife has cautiously returned to the area. The copper-lined bunker has been sealed with concrete and buried under tons of earth, a precaution against anyone attempting to replicate the conditions that created the anomaly. At the trailhead, a small monument now stands, bearing the names of the Pinecrest Five and the dates of both their disappearance and return. Below the names is a quote suggested by Eliza Winters: "Time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean with currents, eddies, and still waters. We are all adrift in it together, connected by memory and love across distances we can barely comprehend." Tourists stop to read the plaque, take photographs, and wonder about the extraordinary story behind those simple words. Most move on quickly, returning to their normal lives, their linear perception of time unchallenged. But occasionally someone will linger, gazing up at the ridge with a thoughtful expression. Perhaps they are considering the fragility of what we call reality, or the resilience of 5 young people who refuse to surrender to an impossible situation. Or perhaps they are simply contemplating the powerful truth that emerged from this unprecedented event, that even in a universe where time itself can fold and fracture, human connection remains the strongest force of all, capable of reaching across decades, across dimensional boundaries, across the very fabric of reality to bring the lost ones home. And somewhere in Pinecrest, 5 friends who slipped out of time and found their way back again are living the greatest adventure of all, a normal life, one day at a time, moving forward.